Children, don't grow weary. For we don't know when this work will be done, but we trust that God is with us in the midst of this time. And so, whatever time you find yourself in, may you have the strength to endure. Amen. You know, there is a freneticness about life right now that wants to be going full speed all the time. And so I was always trained as a distance runner. I was never trained as a sprinter. Those are two completely different ways of training. Most people say, hey, it's just running, right? It is completely different. It is completely different because you're using your muscles differently, you're using your respiration differently, and you train differently for it. So sprinters who are going to train competitively are going to do a lot more weightlifting because what they need is they need that initial burst. They need that muscle to be strong, to be able to do that in those first 3 steps. So have you ever noticed that when you watch a sprinter run, they're always in a sprinter stance? They'll be down and they're like this. You know why that is? The first 3 steps of a race will determine often who wins. Because the margin is that close. And so if you can have anything that gives you that little bit more of explosion, that's what happens. But anything over a quarter mile, you won't see runners start like that. Can you imagine somebody in a 5K coming out and saying, hey, let me pull out my, or for a marathon, let me pull out my runner's thing so that I can get started? You know that person's not going to make it to the end. Because the run is completely different. You know? And you train your body differently for different types of things. I mean, so the way a football player trains their body is different than the way a basketball player trains their body. And it is different. So I'm here to tell you we're not training for a sprint. No matter what life may tell you, we're not training for a sprint. We're training for endurance running. We're training for something that goes on and on and on. And guess what? You can't see the finish line when you start. One of the things that I've noticed, so the NFL, the sport is a sport I watch. So the NFL has made its peace with gambling. And so you can't avoid seeing commercials for it every single time you watch a game now. And you know what one of the lures of that is, hey, let me tell you how you can get rich quick. Because you're obviously, you must be smarter than the people who are making these things, right? So let me tell you a secret. The casino always wins. Otherwise, they wouldn't build big casinos. If you go up into Oklahoma, if you go to either Durant or past Windstar, there's a reason those buildings are really big. Because they're better at math than you are. There is, and again, it's not that there aren't people who get rich quick, but that's not the point. You can get rich quick and you can get poor really quick. How do you build a life that endures? Jesus tells a parable about seeds that are sown on various types of ground. Some get thrown on the path and it doesn't even break ground. Some gets thrown in the rocky soil and it shoots up really, really quick, but it doesn't have any depth, and so it dies when the hot sun comes. Do you know what the definition or what Jesus gives as a description for the seeds that are sown on the rocky soil? So when Jesus tells this parable and his disciples come and ask him well, what does this mean? What do all these things mean? He says, well, the ones that are sown on the rocky soil are those who are caught up in the lures of wealth and the desires of the world. So when we talk about this parable, so if you're curious, when they talk about lamps and you're curious what those lamps look like, when you go out, if you look to the right, we have a cabinet that has ancient lamps from the ancient world. That's the kind of lamps they're talking about. and some of them are from about this time period. And they're all from the Middle East. So when they're talking about, carrying lamps and carrying oil for it, that's the type of thing that they're talking about. But we're used to, in our world, I say I'll be there at 5 o'clock. If I'm there at 5:05, I'm late, right? So I have had to learn that that is not the reality for everybody. Not the reality for everybody in our culture, and certainly not the reality for everybody else in this world. So when I was in seminary, I had a lot of classmates who were from Africa. And I had to learn that if I invite them over for supper, and I say, well, supper will be at 5:30, for them, that meant that supper will be within 3 or 4 hours of 5:30. It was just a completely different way of approaching time. And so we understand this, this parable sounds really strange to us. Okay, so they show up for the wedding, and then the bridegroom's not there. Why in the world is the bridegroom not there? Well, the reality is, things happen when people arrive. So I have planned to go this direction, but I'm going to humor myself. So this is a story I tell a lot of people when I'm getting ready to do their weddings. So I had to do my sister's wedding. Well, I didn't have to. I was asked to do my sister's wedding. And for those who have been around weddings, you know that typically the bridal party is there early. Because they're getting ready. They're getting everything to be as perfect as possible. So it is... and again, I'm doing this in the church I grew up in, so I'm there visiting, but, it's 30 minutes before the wedding, and the bridal party's not there. That's not normal. But I trust that, this is not one of these cases where you have a runaway bride, because I know my sister. So we're waiting, and I'm sitting there with her future husband, and we're waiting for everything to happen. 5 minutes before the wedding, the limousine with the bridal party pulls up, everybody piles out and runs to the back of the church to try and get finished getting ready. And so I go up to the front of the church and say, we're going to be a little late. So in this case, somebody had forgotten a dress part, and they had to go way back out of town to get that part and come back and everything. Now, the reality is in this ceremony, everybody was going to wait for them, because you're not going to do the wedding without the bride. You're not going to do the wedding without the bride. You're not going to do the wedding without the bride's groom either. You're not going to do the wedding without these two critical people. If they don't show up, something's not happening. So, in this story, nothing's going to start until the bride's groom gets there. But everybody else is ready, and they're waiting, and they've done what they need to do to be ready for this. But some do it wisely, and some do it foolishly. Some say, you know what? I'm going to prepare for the contingency that things may not go the way that I think they're going to go. And there are going to be some who say, you know what? I live my life like a candle in the wind. And I'm going to live it today, to the very fullest that I can right now. And tomorrow I'll figure out how to pay the bills that I ran up today. The reality is there's a lot within our life that we don't know. I can't tell you how long you're going to live. I can't tell you how long you're going to be retired, or how long your job is going to last, or how long it is before your children return home because they graduated college and they haven't found a job yet. Or there are a lot of unknowns in life, right? There are a lot of things that we don't know. And there are a lot of things that we can adjust to. And part of it is, so what are the things that we do so that the things that are important to us, we keep them? How do we keep that light lit? I coached a pastor a couple years ago, And she would tell me, I'm working these 100-hour weeks. And I would say, why? What is so important that you're doing this right now? What is it that you're trying to jam into this period of time? Because you can't sustain that. And if you are sustaining that, you're not going to live very long. But I'm going to tell you something else. And this is I really do think that people who get this figured out, they stand out in the midst of the world. Because in a world that is so focused on the right now, people who say, you know what? The right now is not near as important as everybody else is making it out to be. And I can learn how to live in a way that is sustainable. This is, I think, one of the gifts of the way I was taught when I was growing up. And I've heard other people who were taught the same way. So one of my pastors when I was growing up said, Neil, when you're an adult, you're making your own money. Try and live off 80% of it. Give 10% back to God as a thanks, and give 10% to your future, to your retirement, to putting aside for, but live on that 80%. And you'll figure out what that enough is. Now, have I always done that? No. That's what I try and do right now, but I've not always done that. I would be lying to your face if I said I always had that figured out and I always had that right. Because there's so much in this world that says, yeah, but live to that full 100%. Live into that full 100% right now, and if you don't have your 100% right now, I will give you a loan, or I will give you a credit card, or I will give you something to get that what you want right now. And it's only going to cost you, 18 payments of $699.99. And how we live our lives of faith matters. How we live our lives within our families and within our resources and within our stewardship and all, they all matter. They're all connected. They're all part of this. And part of this is being able to say, at least for me, Lord, you've given me enough. Now, what do we do with the part of the parable where, you have the people, the 5 foolish bridesmaids who didn't have it? And, we can look at it and say, wow, these wise bridesmaids who have set aside, they're kind of selfish at this point, right? Where they say, well, you go out to the marketplace, go get what you need. And I don't know what the right answer is on this one, but what I'll tell you is my own experience. And I'm sharing this honestly with you because this is where I wrestle with this. So because I'm a pastor, I have people come to me frequently asking for help. And here's where I'm at. Here's where I will always make time for them. I will always listen to them. But I've also learned I can't always save them. I can't always save them. I may be able to help them every once in a while, but I can't save them. And maybe, and I'm not saying this to be a society that's full, because that is exactly the opposite direction to where our first lesson is going. Amos, let justice roll down like streams. That's exactly what Amos is pointing towards. I'm not saying to have a cold heart or anything else like that, but I do think that part of it is, how do I equip other people also to learn how to live this life that is wise rather than a life that is foolish. And I think part of that is being able to say, you know what? God, you've given me enough not just for right now, but for the future as well. And so how do I celebrate that which you've given me right now, but then also how do I have something that allows me to keep my life going when things don't go exactly as I planned? And how does my faith connect to all those things? That's the questions that take wisdom. But I do think that part of it is that those ways of life that say, how do I run for endurance instead of run for the sprint? Because so much of life says run for the sprint. But running for endurance is a completely different. So my children, don't lose strength. Because we don't know when this race starts.